what, 3 weeks ago, I guess maybe about 3 weeks ago, I did a conversation with Jay Bell, and on his new book, most unique book I've ever read in my life. There was absolutely no character development, almost no settings, just one explosion after another for 257 pages. Um, I have I have never rocked through a book so hard in my life because there was, um, in the end, okay, the good guys won, but you never had any idea of why they were good guys and the other guys were bad guys, and you really didn't have time to even think about it. So,
Yeah, yeah,
that keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. That that is a current model for sure.
yeah, and especially for television, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of the growing trend in TV is just dialogue and action.
Yeah.
And it's been around. It's actually been around for forever. I mean, obviously, oh, I'm drawing a blank. He wrote 310 to Yuma and Get Shorty.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
yeah.
Elmore Leonard.
Elmore Leonard.
Elmore Leonard. That was his game plan. That was his blueprint.
Yeah.
Dialogue and action, action dialogue, and he wrote. He basically wrote movie screenplays, and was incredibly successful. And there was so it'll come to me, but there was a book earlier that was recommended to me by a teacher that does a great job with dialogue, and it was the same thing. So these things all come and go, but that at its fundamental core, good fiction is about dialogue and action. Now, I
Yes.
personally think that readers fall in love with characters, not plots. And I think it's important for a reader to fall in love with a character, or at least be intrigued by a character, whether that's a good character, a bad character, doesn't matter, as long as it's somebody that they want to follow. They want to find out what happens to that individual. I think that's what gets readers continue turning the pages. Somebody
I
once
agree.
told me that there are only like 7 or 8 plots in the whole literary scheme, and what makes story is the characters that are placed in those plots and the settings.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I don't know that you've seen this, but this is called Robber Barons. This came out in March, and it's my most recent book in the Old Grit series that I've been working on for some time.
okay,
And because of where I live, Bob, I write a lot of settings. I write what I now call, and actually Carmen came up with this term, and it's catching on right now in the industry, frontier fiction.
okay,
I like to take human conflict and put it in very remote wilderness environments. And the environment itself then adds almost like a whole new character to the situation, because not only you're battling the bad guys, but you're battling everything around you at the same time. Or every once in a while, you could cross that up, and that wilderness becomes a salvation. But with that said, the feedback I've had on this book and the reviews I've gotten on it are almost all the same. Oh my God, where did you get this character? And the book is set in 1910. Well, right around 1900, at the turn of the century, and it begins in Alaska, then goes Alaska all the way across the continent to New York and Washington, D.C., and to California and back. But it's about the early days of the robber barons.
sure,
And most people don't know this, but Congress was so desperate to get a profit out of the $7 million they spent to buy Alaska, but they basically wrapped this entire state up and handed it to about 6 industrialists. And it didn't make any difference how much damage was done to the native population or the local villages or the small communities. They ran this state. And that continued until they began to get a little too violent. And that's where this story begins,
right.
where violence becomes their method of controlling. And that basically, I love to write stories that have, at the end, I don't want you to know who the actual hero is going to be until the last 30 pages. And in
Right.
this case, the two of the people are, one is a woman who is an attorney who
Which
defies
is
the good.
unusual for back then, right?
defies the good old boy network and decides to go to Alaska, where there is no regulation on who can practice. And the other is a half Russian, half native girl who is fortunate and is able to go to the University of Oregon and becomes a teacher and a lay minister. In the end, those are my two heroes. And the conflict between those two, because in between is a guy that they both really like. And that was so much fun to write. And I've met, because of the time I've been up here, we have some absolute complete oddball characters. We've had some really remarkable people that I've met as well. About half of the attorneys I would consider really close friends. About half of them I would distance myself as far as I can from.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a lot different most places. But the native woman teacher, they are among the best I've ever worked with. You know, Carmen taught here for a long time before she went into philanthropy. They are among the best teachers I've ever worked with. They are immensely patient, and they have immense sense of how culture affects learning. So,
who did you research about the robber barons? I'm trying to think who were the ones that were up in Alaska. Was it Rockefeller, or was it Vanderbilt, or was there others?
Yes and yes. And the single biggest of the robber barons were all four people who were involved in mining copper got together and formed a syndicate. And they really tried. At that time, copper was almost as valuable as gold, because the beginning of the electronic age had come. And they basically cornered the market. But there were also two small fishing companies in San Francisco that weren't anything, got together, formed a syndicate, went to Congress, and got Congress to give them laws that allow them to just completely pillage all of fishing in Southeast Alaska.
Wow.
Literally starving villages. So, you know, it's a combination of a bunch of different groups, but there were about 5 or 6 syndicates that just controlled this state.
Yeah.
And we had 2 judges and 2 U.S. Marshals in a state, you know, twice the size of Texas.
Yeah.
And they were ordered by the higher courts and by Congress to take care of the business people and screw everybody else. So to make this thing work, the local people had to form their own a vision of how to fix this themselves. And that's really what the story's about. They're not only battling the robber barons, but the congressional and legal system at the same time.
Sure.
So,
yeah, it's complicated. You know, there's a lot. That's a big bite to chew.
Nobody's ever accused me of being really smart, Bob, and I keep biting. I keep biting off these really complex plots. I'm working on another book right now that I had to put aside probably for the next 2 weeks. And by the time I get it published, I don't know that it will ever get published. It's the working title is The Last Days of Vladimir Putin. And I've spent so much time in Russia and have so many friends, and I'm hearing over and over and over again right now that his days are numbered.
Really?
And
fascinating.
That the war going the way it has is creating real animosity within the military itself. And the economy is just weakening like crazy. And all the big money guys that he put in place are starving out. And if they aren't, then he's taxing the living hell out of them to keep his war going. And It's just not going very well. I mean, the Ukrainians have finally figured out how to fight the Russians. You don't fight for territory. You make it so costly that they can't prosecute the war. And that's what's happening. So anyhow, my thought is, if I don't get that out by the summer of 27, okay, it'll be a moot book. So it may be one of those that you just put on the shelf and say, that was a great exercise.
Well, you know, that I went to Russia, as you know, and I spent 3 weeks there right after Perestroika. It was 1998. And, you know, I wrote 3 books in the Charles Jenkins series and set them in Russia. And it remains the most fascinating place that I have ever been in my entire life. And I've done a lot of travel. I've been very blessed. Very fortunate. I've been to Africa, I've been to China, I've been to Egypt. I've been to a lot of very different exotic places, the Galapagos, but Russia, there was some, I've been to Africa twice. There's something about Russia, that the history there and what transpired there between the czars and the Bolsheviks and now communism and now the oligarchs, because at the very fundamental basic, what I found is what you found is that the people were really lovely people there. They were
Absolutely.
incredibly paranoid, rightfully so, but they would go out of their way to help you when I was there. You're lost, you don't know where to go. They would literally walk you, a mile out of their own way to take you where you needed to go. So, what's going on there is a tragedy. Not to get into world politics, because certainly the United States can't be throwing too many stones right now. But what's happened there is a tragedy, and the tragedy is that you have a lot of lovely people that are suffering.